Well, good morning. It was 70 years ago this summer that a young high school graduate started his career in broadcasting at WJPD Radio in Ishpeming, a small 250-watt station that proudly proclaimed itself the voice of the Iron Country. This month, many of us here at TV6, as well as people across the Upper Peninsula, said goodbye to that broadcaster with the passing of Carl Pelham. This morning, I've asked a couple of his longtime colleagues here at TV6 to join me as we offer a final tribute to the Ishpeming native who became a broadcasting legend in the 70 years that followed. It starts right now.
From TV6, this is The Ryan Report. Here's your host, Don Ryan.
Well, Carl Pelham was best known as the host of the Finland Calling Sumi Kutsu show, which owned Sunday mornings here on TV6 for over 50 years. But Carl's life involved much more than that. And that will be the subject of our conversation this morning, as I'm joined by Scott Zerbel, Creative Services Promotions Manager, and Steve Asplund, News Director. They haven't been here for 50 years, but they have been part of the TV6 team for a long time. We also have some excerpts from an interview I did with Carl shortly after his last Finland Calling broadcast. Between us, we'll share some memories from Carl's very interesting life. First of all, thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having us, Don.
You know, as we were talking ahead of time, Scott, you said that you really kind of started out in television as a fan of Carl's.
Well, you know, growing up here in Marquette, especially back in the 1960s, there was no such thing as cable. We had 3 television stations, eventually 4, and Finland Calling was a staple at our household growing up, and you know, and we always look forward to watching it. My dad spoke a little bit of Finn, but it really didn't matter that we couldn't understand what he was saying. You know, it was television. That was our introduction to local television, and you know, and it was always a treat to be able to watch the program on Sunday mornings. Okay,
and Steve, as we were talking, you kind of recalled maybe more of the fun side of Carl, which you had more opportunity to see, you know, as you worked together with Carl.
Yeah, when I first started here, I was in the evenings, and then I switched to the mornings, so I was there early in the morning. Carl would come in to record his show early in the morning, and he'd play little pranks on you, like the lights would go out. So you're the only one in the newsroom, so you'd sit there and go like, well, what's going on? Is there a power problem? And then they'd come on, and then they'd go off, and then you'd turn around and you'd see Carl back there, and you'd catch him flicking the light switch. Or the film cans, we used to do 16mm film, and he'd walk in the back door, the back of the newsroom, not see anybody around, and he'd throw it on the tile floor, and everybody would jump. And usually it was just me in there, but he was a prankster at heart, a good-natured guy, and really a lot of fun.
Just fun to be around.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of interesting. Carl and I both went to Ishpeming High School.
Okay.
We both had the same English teacher, Ben Renz, and he was there a few years ahead of me. But Carl told the story to me about the fact that Mr. Renz used to have students go in a separate room and read into a microphone, and then the class could sit and listen on the speaker in the classroom. But one day Carl went in there and did that, and when he came back into the classroom, Paul Crowley from WJPD Radio, the program director, was there. And so it turned out that that was really Carl's audition. He hired him in 1948. And that's how it all started. Actually, Carl and I both got our start in broadcasting at WJPD. He started about 7 years before I did, and there was one major difference. I wanted to be a radio announcer. Carl wanted to be a baseball player. His dream was to pitch in the big leagues, and he almost saw that dream come true. Here's that story as Carl told it to me.
Well, the Boston Braves had a tryout camp in Negaunee. And I applied, and there was quite a few guys, and must have been 50, 60 kids throwing and running and hitting and so forth. And I had a chance to start the game. And after I pitched, the scout came and said, are your parents here? And my dad happened to be there. And he said, I want to talk to you, come to your house, and signed a contract for a Class D ball club in Virginia, Bluefield, West Virginia.
Okay.
It was a Class D ball club of the Boston Braves, and I was to report to spring training the following March, and my dream was coming up.
Yeah, but it didn't get fulfilled, did it?
No, my wife Doris She was my best friend, was going to nursing school in Chicago at the time. And I said, I'm going rabbit hunting tomorrow. She said, don't go. Don't go. I went, and I was taken for a rabbit and shot in the head, neck, and shoulders with a shotgun. And that was in October. In December, all of a sudden, I couldn't move my right arm. Some of the pellets had lodged in between the bones of my shoulder, developed bursitis or whatever, and that was it. I went to spring training for 2 weeks, courtesy of the Braves, on a train from Ishpeming to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Spent 2 weeks, couldn't even pick up a baseball, and they gave me the money to get home on a bus.
So the dream was over. But
the dream was over, but I didn't give up. I hooked up a punching bag in my basement, and and I got back, so I could still throw. I didn't have a fastball anymore, but I could throw a good curve and a knuckleball, and I went out for a Giants tryout camp in Iron Mountain. Again, I started that game and did well. And the scout came up and said, it's too bad you don't have a fastball. And that was it.
you know, as you think about it, you know, and Carl earned great celebrity here in the UP. But there were so many twists and turns in his life. And, you know, even 10 years after he started in radio the first time, he still wasn't on a permanent career track. Do you know some of that history?
Well, you know, I do know that he, you know, as far as the radio thing, and did that early, and then he did spend some time in the mines, and I think he was underground. I think he was at the Mather, which it takes a certain
Cliff Shaft, I think.
Cliff Shaft. Okay, but he did go underground.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. But you know, I worked on the railroad for 5 years, and that's hard work. You know, but being underground, I think it takes a certain person. Carl was a little bit tall as well, you know, so I as far as his experience and going underground, I don't think he liked it 100%. You know, and then he went into the service in the 50s in Korea, and then he came back and went to the mines again, and then he left there and went to radio.
Right, and then he was laid off in the mines, and kind of a big layoff.
Yep.
You know, when Carl was laid off in the mines, it was time to turn back to the place where he started his working career. He did head back to WJPD Radio. At that time, he was a much more mature and experienced broadcaster than the young high school graduate. He shared with us one of those memories from those days.
Yeah, the studio was in a mobile home, and the studio faced the highway, and I would say hello in the mornings to the green Chevy going left and a red Ford going east, and they were tooting the horns in heavenly days. They kept me busy just saying hello to hello, and then I'd get phone calls, and one phone call rings a bell is that she said, the fella in the green Chevy going west took the garbage bag instead of his lunch.
We'll be back to share more memories after we take this break. We're talking this morning about Carl Pelham. Joining me, Steve Asplund and Scott Zerbel. You know, when I interviewed Carl a couple of years ago, we had a chance to talk about his early experiences here at TV6. Here's what he had to share with us.
First job was working the camera, behind the camera.
Okay.
The process then was learn what's happening behind the camera for at least a month and a half to maybe even 2 months, which I did. And running camera, Bruce Turner was doing the news at the time. Darby had his kids show at 5 o'clock and running camera for that. And then I was told, okay, and I was hired to do sports. But instead, they put me doing weather.
Okay.
And, you've done the
I've
weather.
done the weather, yeah, for a long time.
I mean, we're both not meteorologists.
No, no. There were no graphics, no anything back then.
No, nothing, no. But we made it.
And one of the things you had to do at that time was pour a glass of beer.
Oh, yeah.
Not easy.
Not easy. You had to read the teleprompter and pour and have a good pour. I mean, with a head on it.
Right.
Well, lots of luck.
Tough work. You know, it's kind of interesting to listen to those early days, but you know, in fact, Carl was really kind of a trailblazer. He's trailed blazed the trail for the rest of us to come.
He did. He did a lot of first. I mean, the TV6 Morning News. He was the first anchor, along with Patty Derrick, who did the weather. He did a lot of innovative stuff with Fiddlin' Calling and so forth that nobody had ever done, and it was very popular, and everybody really accepted it with open arms.
And he talked about starting behind camera, and I think you started that way too.
Yes, I did. Carl started behind the camera, and I started behind the camera. I was working on my master's degree at Northern at the time, and not many people know this, but I applied 3 times until they finally hired me here at the station as a camera operator, and I got to run camera for Carl's program. I got to run camera for Upper Michigan Today show, because I did, between day and night shifts, as well as doing stuff with Steve in the evenings back, and this is 1984, in the 86 window. And but Carl, Carl Pelham was one of the broadcast pioneers in the Upper Peninsula, just simply because of, and you yourself, Don, when you guys worked and what you did, you didn't have anybody to really kind of show you the ropes. I mean, you guys did it. He did live. I love the photo of Carl standing there in front of a Blatz sign with a glass of Blatz beer, and they used to do live commercials and pour the Blatz beer and drink it live on the air.
We said earlier that Carl had a number of different assignments over the years, and one of those was to serve as you mentioned, as the co-host of a show that was on at noon Monday through Friday called Upper Michigan Today. When we talked with Carl, he remembered one show in particular when the legendary singer Tom Jones was the guest.
That was unreal, to sit all of a sudden and see this gentleman with a great big silver cross around his neck.
Yeah.
And that just blew me right out. That's the one interview that I have to say I blew.
Really?
He just shook me up. He was such a nice guy. So.
I kind of worry about getting a show a week here. You had to do one a day, Monday through Friday back in those days.
But that was fun. It was Upper Michigan Today, the people and places of the UPs.
Right. And you did one with Santa Claus too, as I recall, which kind of upset the phone company.
Oh yes, we had arranged for, I don't remember his name now, but he was Santa Claus, and when he walked in the building, you believed in Santa Claus. So the engineers worked up and so forth and fixed the camera like we're going to the North Pole. And I asked him, would you mind if some kids called and asked and told you, Santa Claus, what they would like? Sure. Poulsen from the Michigan Bell said, don't you ever do that again, because we blew up the bell system.
And Scott, you had experience with the Upper Michigan Today show as well.
Yeah, I actually in January of 1986, I became co-host, and Carl went into the news department, and I was co-host with Sue McQuaid from '86 through 1990. Carl kind of showed me the ropes, and I grabbed it from there, and it was great to have him kind of to look up to, and as kind of a mentor as far as kind of showing me, a very young kid broadcaster, kind of how to do things.
Right. And you can certainly appreciate the chore of getting a half-hour show together every day.
It is, and he did it with such great attitude. I mean, it was a challenge for him at times, but the thing is, he never really showed it. He always accepted it, and he did the news on the Upper Michigan Today show, as I did, and it was just it was a unique experience, a real good companionship that he had with everybody here.
There's no question that for many, Carl will be remembered most as the host of Sumi Kutsu, the show that ran for so many years here on TV6. When the show first went on the air, no one would have dreamed that it would still be running more than 50 years later. How it all came about is an interesting story that Carl recalled for us.
The travel agency convinced John Borgen, our GM at the time, if there was a Finn show, it would be successful, because the population of the Upper Peninsula back then in the 1960 census was 300,000, 27% first or second generation Finn. So if there was a Finnish program that would induce those Finns and their spouses and family to travel to Finland. And that's how it started. And Eugene Sinervo and I were told, get it started. So
and you did.
March 25, 1962, it went on the air as a half hour.
And you actually had a trip to Finland that first summer.
That first summer, yes. So that was the first of 34.
And you had some amazing guests.
Wow.
Presidents and ambassadors.
I just had Larry Shabbat call me the other day, and he said, do you remember Rainier von Fiat? What a good Finn name, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, he was a guest of mine. I had a Professor Puntila, who spoke, and I didn't. Everything was going right over my head. I didn't know what he was saying, but we made it.
You started your Finland calling dances
In 1964.
and you had a pretty interesting episode at the first dance.
Well, the armory, Ishpeming Armory was packed, and right in the middle of the affair, boom, fellow dropped dead. And I was going to quit.
That would be enough to make you quit.
Well, exactly. My goodness. Like it was my fault that they came and
Right.
Paul Ramseth convinced me that, no, hey, they died with their boots on. So I conceded, had another dance, and a woman dropped dead.
Oh boy.
But knock on wood, that was the last time.
And they became amazingly successful. I recall actually reading in your book that you had one in South Range where there were...
South Range in 1966, I don't have the exact number, but there was way over 800, and that floor was moving.
Right.
And they just kept going up because we quit selling tickets.
You both had some experience attending those Finland calling dances.
Yeah, they were really a joy to go to. I mean, I shot a lot of the video on a lot of those Finland dances that they had held all over the place, from Negaunee all the way up to Calumet, and the people were always so genuine. They came out and greeted Carl, and he really loved being around people and exchanging stories and you know, just good old-fashioned chit-chat. And
you experienced some of that as well.
Yes, in the early 90s I was a local program manager, and Carl, with his show, was part of, I oversaw some of that, but as part of that too is that, you know, I would also go around and do Finn dances. I remember when they debuted the new upper Finland Calling theme that was produced, and the biggest orchestral presentation at Kaufman Auditorium, and I went and filmed that, and we cut that into his open and used that as his open for a number of years.
Fun times.
Yeah.
We'll be back to share some more memories about Carl in just a couple of minutes. We have one more video clip I want to show you that reminds us of another of Carl's interests, ski jumping. Not that he was a jumper, but he was an enthusiastic supporter. This is Carl with TV6 sports reporter Scott Garso at Copper Peak in Ironwood back in the mid-70s.
Carl, the Copper Peak officials tell us the hill's never been in better shape.
Weather is perfect, the hill conditions are perfect, and Scott, I think this is going to be a big weekend of ski flying, and I think we're going to see a new record here at Copper Peak.
Well, Jerry Martin has that North American distance mark now. Who do you look for to go after it?
Well, there's a couple of Japanese here. We have Jerry Martin and Tom Dargay, Cole record holders already. I think the hill record is going to go, and I think we're going to have a real good weekend of ski flying.
Carl, as I said, wasn't a ski jumper, but he certainly was involved with the ski club.
Yeah, I mean, if you talked ski jumping, it was Carl Pelham was in the sentence all the time, because he was just so integral to the whole sport itself, even though he was just the announcer. But anything that they held, it was at Suicide Hill or Pine Mountain, he was the voice of the ski jumping events.
And you had some of that experience as well.
Absolutely. Well, you know, especially early in the 80s and stuff, we did a lot of events with ski jumping and with the U.S. National Ski Hall of Fame. And, you know, and Carl was part of it all the time. I mean, he would do the hill announcing, and he'd announce it in English, but then he'd repeat it in Finnish. You know, so it was kind of gave it an international kind of flair.
There's so much to talk about, you know, as far as Carl is concerned. For example, his community service. Yeah,
he did a lot. I was at the funeral that was for him, and I didn't know he was that involved in the church, that he did that much and so forth. But he was involved with all sorts of community events and public service, from the transportation department in Lansing to the county board here in Marquette County. He was really involved, and he really worked well with people and tried to get things done for the public overall.
We have just half a minute left, but certainly family was always important to Carl as well.
Absolutely. You know, one thing that that was consistent with Carl is his love for his family, and you know, no matter what he did, and especially I think in his latter years where he needed a little bit more help with his Finn dances and whatnot, his family was always there to support him.
Okay. Great life. I'll be back with some final thoughts for you after we take one more break. As we pointed out during our broadcast this morning, Carl Pelham truly made his mark as the host of one of the longest-running shows in the history of television. But Carl was much more than that. He was a television pioneer, arriving here at TV6 when our business was just finding its way, and he helped blaze the trail for those who would follow. He took on a lot of different assignments while he was here, from sportscaster to host of the daily Upper Michigan Today show to commercial producer, and of course the host of Sumi Kutsu. He was also an active member of the community, serving as a Marquette County Commissioner and on the Highway Commission for 13 years. He was a member of the Sumi College Board of Trustees, the Ishpeming Ski Club, and other community organizations. All those facts tell you what Carl did, but they don't fully tell you who Carl was. Carl was someone who enjoyed his life. He truly loved what he did. We frequently heard Carl express that joy with his signature saying, "Holy wa." He didn't just host Sumi Kutsu, he was Sumi Kutsu, and he loved the involvement with the Finnish community that grew out of that show, from the dances to the trips to Finland to his involvement with FinFest and other events. Carl enjoyed being with people, and he had fun with his co-workers, and Carl kept his life in perspective, always remembering that his family and his relationship with his church were on the top of the list. Most of us hope we will be remembered in a positive way when we move on from this life. There's no question that Carl Pelham will be remembered as someone who made his mark and did it well. I'll be back in a minute. Well, that's it for this morning. Remember, you can also see this show at uppermichigansource.com. Today's show will be available starting tomorrow afternoon. Thanks to Scott Zerbel and Steve Asplin for coming in this morning to share some memories about Carl Pelham. He had an interesting life and he will be missed. I hope you can join us again next Sunday morning.